Yes, people, massive 4 games have passed already in the FIFA World Cup, and we have already seen the three host nations. Yes, we have already seen the three host nations. The US men's national team, what a killer game in Inglewood, California yesterday, and also in the Azteca. It was more of a stalemate in the opening game of the FIFA World Cup. But at the end of field, Canada saved themselves. Yeah, Canada saved themselves from a disgrace opening fixture in Group B versus the Bosnia-Herzegovina. Massive points though for Bosnia. Massive points. What I've seen this Bosnia team try to do similar things like what they did yesterday in Toronto, in Brazil versus, yes, against the Argentina team, who didn't really look themselves for much part of the game in Brazil when they beat Bosnia-Herzegovina 2-0 from a Sergio Aguero double. But we're going to get into it, and we're going to make a quick reaction on the 4 World Cup games. So much love and respect to the fans I'm tuning in as well to Nicardo Media House Channel. Really appreciate you guys. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Yeah. So out here again, my first reaction, what happened in Azteca, the opening game of the World Cup, where Mexico team, I was expecting to see a Mexico team play in a type of similar fashion of a way like how the US men's national team started their World Cup campaign versus Paraguay. But one thing I have to say, it goes back to the last sets of World Cup, where Mexico played in Qatar, in Russia. The build-up can be a little bit lethargic. It can be a little bit slow, where it's too predictable. It gives teams a bit more time to sit low, to get more organized in their shell, form a better defensive structure, while, Cesar Montes, Johan Vasquez, the 2 CBs for the Mexican team, they just playing around with the ball. You have Reyes out on that right back. You have Gallardo playing the left back as well. It's just too comfortable for teams, to sit in a low block versus a Mexican team. And this can be a pros and con for Mexico going to any World Cup game. One, they're a very good team keeping possession of the football, when they're in their mood and a very good day. But 2, it can be very detrimental on how they break down teams. And, look at Liga, Fidalgo, and Brian Gutierrez, which I think he was a magnificent player in versus South Africa on the day. He was the better of the bunch of midfielders that they played in that game. Brian Gutierrez, a few opportunities he missed, but I just feel like there's no real creative spark, in that game. Whether or not Javier Aguirre going to make a tweak and get one of those players out, either Fidalgo or Liria, but he needs someone that going to get on the ball, going to be dynamic. And I think when you look at the US men's national team, I know Tillman and McKennie, how much they overload, both wing areas. I just see, a Mexican team just very flat in the midfield, no real dynamic. They didn't really bring any diversity in that midfield. It was just too predictable, at times to defend. But the South Africa team, when you look at the South Africa team, playing 5 at the back, this was a huge surprise. This coming from a huge surprise for a lot of the South African fans, and also the pundits that cover this national team, like the Benny McCarthy and some of these big name players that's played for this team in the past. They were shocked. Yeah, they were shocked. If you've seen scenes, they were like 5-3-2, and I'm telling you, playing 5-3-2, the 2 wing back, those 2 players have to balance out a team playing in that style of a fashion. And when I look at the team, Modua, the 20 on that right wing back side, and Madiba on that left hand side playing the left wing back, they couldn't balance out each other. They couldn't beat a man to save their life. They couldn't get enough crosses into the box. They were a bit uncomfortable on the ball. And again, Sibisi and Ocon, they were much poor in the game. The real star man in that back line, was Mbokazi. Yes, I think that player have somewhere to go in his career. He has some journey to go in his career. I think he have a bit of quality, and I would be very shocked, to see him, to still be playing for Chicago Fire in the MLS coming up at the end of this transfer or the winter transfer. But let me say this, man. For a South Africa team, got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sundown player local player playing in the South Africa Premier League start in that starting level. There was no real synergy. There was no real connection. Yeah, there wasn't any real team collective effort work. Look, Hugo Bras going to have to change up a lot of things. You have to revert back to the back four. You have to go back to the back four. This team cannot play a back five because the wingers and the people that will sacrifice for this stupid starting level for South Africa. Player like Mofo King, Apolis. These players are a critical player to the South African team. They're very pivot to what the South African team have done throughout the qualifier. But I know they're not a world beater, but my goodness, man, this team was so poor on the day. But the pressing mistake, from turnovers with the South African team, it just kept happening through the entire game. 2 red cards as well. Sitol, again, he will be missed as a number 6. I think he had a very decent game. And just to see Raul Jimenez, getting his first World Cup goal, who someone our career could have ended a few years back playing in the Premier League. Just to see he got a very good goal as well, found himself, solo on that back post, but you have to give Alvarado a very good, you have to give Alvarado some praises as well, to find the Mexican on the back post. But QNS, this is a player I think can make a big difference. Look at how he's coming off left, getting into Raul Jimenez's position, dropping into the number 10 position, find himself into pockets. He's a player that played all over, and these are some of the style that we've seen in last night's game, the US men's national team versus Paraguay. And if they can implement a few of these mixture of plays, coming from the midfield 3 and also coming from the 2 wingers, Alvarado and QNS, I think Mexico can raise a bit of their quality and lift the bar a little bit high. But say this to say that, massive, they're moving on to the next game, and I think Mexico have just slightly enough to get a full 3 points from a appalling South African team. But we're going to move on, and talk about, South Korea versus Czechia. First 20-30 minutes of the game, you will say, look, this Czechia team look real promise. They were playing in their own element of playing direct, playing nasty, try to intimidate, a very small build South Korea team where their players are not so physical, but like the Kim Jae, played for Bayern Munchen. He's 6'2", 6'3". He's a physical player. They have quite a few physical players, but not to the standard of where Czechia, can really bring a lot of physicality and a brutal force. And that's what they did. They fouled the South Korea team a lot. Maybe that was a bit of a team strategy going forward, not to allow them to settle on the ball. But the set piece, I would have outlined and set a few pieces around this Czechia team coming into this World Cup. In the World Cup qualifier, they have 8-9 goals at the set piece alone throughout the UEFA qualification. And so it shows that this is a magnificent part going forward for this Czechia team. And I want to say this. This was where it's a real mind-blowing situation where the 3 important players in the attacking third for Czechia, Patrick Schick, Provad, and Sulc, the Olympic Lyonnais man, right? And the Slavia Prague and the Bayer Leverkusen man. The coach took them all out in the 63rd minute. That says a lot. That's how poor those players were. Even though it was a very okay first 20-30 minutes, but the last 15 minutes of that first half, you have to give a lot of praises to that South Korea team. I think they just found their feet on the ground. They find a very good balance, and they can play around the football in around that midfield, and to get their most creative players and more influential players that can set the tempo. And look at the Birmingham man and the man, the PSV player, Kwang, that scored that goal as well. Very good goal, clever goal. Yeah, that second goal that they scored, it's a very clever goal. Yeah. Is it the second goal that he scored? It was the first goal. It was the first goal in the 67th minute. Yeah, that goal I'm talking about where the number 6 scored for South Korea. Clever finish. But when those two players like Pike and Kwang, start to get on the football, the man that played for Lee for Paris Saint-Germain, it's a different type of a game for this South Korea game and for that South Korea team. And I just think they just took the game away. But the second half, Czech Republic came out with a different style. They came out a bit more aggressive for the first 5-8 minutes. Then it just went away in a quick flash. South Korea took back the game. But if you look at the possession in the first half, it was just around 55-45 in favor of South Korea. And then it tilted in a massive way in the second half where South Korea have a bulk of that possession. But the XGs for both teams went up massively. But also from South Korea, the XG from in the first half, 0.77 to 1.53 in the second half. That shows that they created a lot of opportunity. The Suchek goal as well that got disallowed, he was offside. But, you have to Kofal, this player, the long throws was a big problem for the South Africa team, South Korea team, and also the set piece. Whenever him or the players Delaney stand up over the ball, it was a massive problem for the South Korea team. So moving forward, Czech Republic can get points against South Africa. They will have a very good chance of getting into the knockout run by one of those best third spot as well. But move on to the nether game. We're going to talk about what happened at BMO Field. Yeah, we're going to talk about what happened at BMO Field. Look, it's not the best of start, for Canada. It wasn't the best of start. Bosnia really started the game well. It's a team that can play different type of games, on any given day. But the composure of some of the players in that midfield, and I'm going to outline a few players, a player like Basic, in the midfield. He was very good. He was an influential player in that team. And the captain, Mamorovic, he made some last-ditch tackle to save. And also Kolasinac before he came off with a bit of a muscle injury as well, or it was cramped. But at one point, he was feeling his thighs, he was feeling his calf, he was feeling the back of his hamstring. He was all over on his feet. But that's so much he was running in the game. But that game that the Bosnian team played, I think it was a magnificent game. It's just the composure of they weren't erratic in their gameplay of waste opportunity. They make sure that every pass that they made, it actually going towards a teammate, whether it's going to be direct or the short passes that they played. And Lukic, the player that's played in Romania, scored around 18 goals in his club career the last campaign. Yeah, he was very good. And, Demorovic, the player that's playing for Stuttgart, the number 10. I just think it was a very good game. And also, Katic, the defender for Schalke, I just think it was a very good game. But it was a lot of wasteful opportunity from the Canadian men's national team. Jonathan David got some very clear opening. And that tells you what type of season the player is coming off with, from Juventus as well. Very poor season for him. And Buchanan, I think it was a very below par. I think he could have been a lot more better in the game. But when Canada really started to take over the game, I think it was when Astakio, the midfield, and also Kone, the man that's playing for Sassuolo in the Italian Seria A, is when those two players really to start play the passes more and more to each other, start to feel out the game a lot more. I think the momentum and the intensity kind of raised a little bit for this Canadian team, where they started to get players on the pitch. They started to press Larea, further up on the pitch, Johnstone, the Celtic man, Larea, I think he got some few good looks out on that left-hand side, but you could see that this was a team that missed Alphonso Davies. Yes, this was a team that really missed Alphonso Davies out on that left side. He's like a Rose Rice for this Canada team on that left-hand side. I remember the World Cup qualifier campaign, the build-up to Qatar. They flew through the entire process of qualifying for the World Cup in the CONCACAF region. But let's see what this Bosnia team will do. But this shouldn't be with a surprise, because it shows that they can play football. It goes back to the World Cup in Brazil when Argentina beat them 2-0 and Sergio Aguero scored a brace, to took the game away from them. Go back to what Sergio Aguero did to them. But if you even look at and remember that Brazil World Cup where they played Argentina, a few moments in the game they got some look-ins, but from minute 1 to minute 90, they were in the game. They were actually, trying their best to get something out of that game. But the big game of the day, I think the World Cup has begun last night versus US men's national team versus Paraguay. And a lot of people talking about how poor or of a bad team Paraguay. I don't know how many of you pay attention to what happened in the CONMEBOL region. This was a team got some massive points against some of the bigger footballing country in South America. Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay doesn't get any bigger than that. Those are the 3 South American teams who have won the World Cup only in that region. And for Paraguay to pick up 3 points in fixtures versus those 3 teams, it tells you a lot. And also beat a team that arguably in the last 10 years who have won 2 Copa America, Chile. We know it's a deteriorating Chile squad, but got points again, versus Venezuela, who was knocking on the door in early segment of the CONMEBOL qualification run. But what the US men's national team did in that game yesterday, I don't think anyone really expect that would have happened. And for a very decent CONMEBOL team for Paraguay, tells me that it really hit the win. The flourish of the US team came at a bit of a surprise of no one expect the US team to hit that ceiling. And they did hit a magnificent ceiling. But it is the starting level for me. Sergio Des out on that right-hand side, I think it was the changer of the entire game for me. I think it brings a lot of different dynamics. I think it brings a difference on how that right side operate when Timothy Weah out on that right-hand side is either as a wing back or as a right wing midfielder, or a right forward. I think this 1v1, he was clinical, against his opposition peer in that game. And I must say, the way how they started the game, and for Christian Pulisic and, Weston McKennie have some very good partnership in that game. I just think they own goal by his name is Bad. Let me tell you who was trying to get his name pronounced properly. Let me get his name pronounced properly for you guys. His name is Bobadilla. Bobadilla, scored that own goal. And I can say this. They took him off the start of the second half and it brought on Mauricio and he got that goal and it changed everything. But if you're going to start a game just like what the US team did yesterday, if you're not going to reward yourself with 2 goals, in the first half, but that early goal, I think that really changed a lot of the thinking of continuing this approach, being positive. But it's all about that second goal by Florian Balogun in that 31st minute. And that's when they realize that, listen, we are up for something great in this game. With them created a chance and make it happen where the ball hit the onion bag. The first one was an own goal, wasn't of a really okay, in the game. It was a very good scoreline, but for that second goal, for them to create that by themselves and then to hit another goal at the end of the first half, late into the extra time around the 58th minute, Florian Balogun again scored a brace in the first half. That's when they realized that there's something special about our team in this first half. And they came out, tried to manage the game a bit, perhaps slow it down a little bit, try to, take the game away from the Paraguayan team. But the Paraguayan team make a few tweaks, make a substitution, and I think it really changed the first 10-15 minutes in the second half. And then, the US start to find themselves, start to make some quick flourish, some quick passing. And I think with the midfield of Tillman, McKennie in front, Tyler Adams, look at how much they overload, the wing areas. Pulisic, I think he was magnificent. What's going to happen with him and that calf injury. I heard him speak and, it's okay. He's not going to be 100% tell you that he will be ready for that next game versus Australia. That's a concern for Mauricio Pochettino. What you witnessed in that first half, from Pulisic, you want him to be a fit player until the end of this World Cup campaign ends for the US men's national team. So, a lot of positive around, but the different diversity of this midfield, Adams, McKennie, and Tillman. I think it's a much well-fine balance. You know, look, many people would have showed that Berhalter would have been a very good candidate to start in the midfield of what he shows against Germany, what he shows against the Senegalese team. Florian Balogun scored a goal against Senegal as well, and it would have showed that, listen, he's the man need to get the start over Pepe. Pepe got a few opportunities in that Senegal game. Didi took his opportunity. Balogun, they speaking highly about him already. Scored a brace. First time it is happening since 1930. The last time they beat a team with 3 clear goals, and it was the same Paraguayan team. American player scored a hat-trick in that game. So history is repeating itself at this moment. But the big question, can the US men's national team keep up this standard? This standard that they set in the World Cup can be the pro and the con. Yeah, where it can be a disadvantage and it can be advantage. But they leave themselves for a lot of critiques to come their way if they don't keep up the standard, which I think it's going to be very tough to keep up this high level. Yeah, especially playing in dense heat. I think the next game will be in Seattle and they shift back again to the West Coast. So it will be in dense heat from the Midwest to the West Coast. So let's see what will happen. But US men's national team fans, they are expecting a lot more from their team going against, you want to say, a less half-decent team. Australia is not at the quality of a Paraguayan team. So let's see what's going to happen. But kudos to Mauricio Pochettino. I think he have done the trick. I think tactically and how this team play, Anthony Robinson wasn't really that game where he bring a lot of highlights package where he was magnificent in the attacking third. But I think Tim Ream was very good in the game. Tim Ream was very good in the game. I think he had made some recoveries run as well. But the likes of Ensucio, Sanabria, Miguel Almiron, these players, and Gomez, the most influential players in the attacking third for Paraguay, they just couldn't live up to that intensity. And I think the US team just hit the roof off where it just was a hurricane just fly through the room. And the Paraguayan players was like, each time a goal scored, they were like looking in the sky like, what the hell is happening? But when I saw that goal scored in the 58th minute before the end of the first half, that was the last dagger for me. But much love and respect. See you guys sometime again watching more games that will come today. People, I'm out. Don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Yeah, I'm out.